Hi, Ellen. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Michelle, for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to be on the call with you. I know we've been scheduling and rescheduling this, and it feels like meeting an old friend now that we're finally on the call together. So I just want to thank you for making it happen because I know we both have super busy schedules.
I know it's been crazy. I think this has been like 6 months in the making.
Exactly. I think I went back to an email and I was like, oh shit, this was like 8 months ago. I didn't respond to her. I'm bad. Thank God we have
No, I'm
friends in
just,
common.
I thought it was me, not you. So
Well,
I think
that's
I'll
good.
take the blame.
At least we know we have similar value sets that we're both concerned about helping one another. So I wanted to actually welcome Ellen Chen on the call today, and we have a very special guest because she really is somebody who speaks from her heart. And something that I learned about her before getting on the call is how much values talk is important to her. And I think the thing is that obviously everybody knows that that's something super important to me. So I'm excited for her to expand on that. But Ellen is actually an investor and an advisor, and she has spent a lot of her life in the business world. And she also likes to focus on minority owned and female owned businesses. And I was lucky enough to meet her through our mutual friend, Katie Chen, who doesn't know Katie because Katie seems to know everybody. But thank God for that because she mutually connected us. The other thing to note about Ellen is that she was one of the co-founders of Mendocino Farms. And anybody who knows, it's not called the quick service restaurant. It's basically you married two industries, correct?
Yeah, it's fast casual. And even in fast casual now, there's premium fast casual, which is, I guess the genre we're in.
Well, I would say that your premium
Fancy.
casual food is amazing.
Thank
And
you.
and what's also nice about it is that you've made it an accessible price point for people to be able to still purchase it and have healthy food. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show and being here and a part of us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a total honor. So thank you
Oh,
for letting me share my story.
of course. Well, speaking of sharing your story, I always like it when somebody kind of takes people through their background because I think it's super helpful for people to get perspective that you weren't always in the food service industry. It kind of came about. And I was lucky enough to hear a bit of your story last week at the We Do Los Angeles Summit. But I think giving perspective is so important.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you had asked me in my 20s or even in high school, like, what do you want to be or what do you want to do? I would never have said restaurateur or being in the hospitality industry. And I'm going to say the stereotypical like Asian thing, which I hate, right? But it's the expectations where you were going to go to college and you were going to,
It had to be
climb
Ivy
the,
League.
what?
And it had to be Ivy League.
Well, I was a disappointment to my parents.
I mean, really?
I didn't even apply. I went to a UCS San Diego. So I know. I kind of, and I guess I've always been a rebel. Even when I was younger, I always wanted to take a different path. I love my parents. They were supportive, but we were always butting heads because I always just felt like there was something else that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a doctor, but I did, after I graduated, I went to go work for Accenture. So I was in consulting.
That's a
And I was
traditional path for your parents.
yeah, so that was good. They were very happy about that. And so, for the next like 10 years after consulting, I actually did a stint in advertising as well. I worked for a boutique ad agency called Suissa Miller on
Oh, I
the
know them.
yeah,
Mhm.
that was a real eye opener when you talk about culture and values. It was
Yes.
crazy. I think I took a lot of lessons learned from that on and not because I think it was just the world itself in the ad world was just very different, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then I
Well,
actually,
and it's an interesting, different kind of fast pace to go from Accenture, which is more conservative,
yeah,
right? And more traditional and
yep,
very structured of how you
very
approach
much
things
so.
to go to advertising, which is dynamic,
It
but
was
also,
dynamic. And it was very creative, but I wasn't on the creative side. I was on the account side. So I just still felt like I was this liaison, almost consultant like. And it was a very different environment. I left it very quickly. And then I hate to say the internet boom because that's how old I am, but the internet, kind of the .com boom happened, and I went to go work for some startups, and I was really lucky. And now I've looked back, I was like, oh, I kind of had been an entrepreneur-ish all through my life, because even my first client at Accenture was a startup. It was Sprint PCS.
Oh, okay, interesting.
They were a startup back then. I know. So, but I went to go work for two startups. The last startup I worked at got acquired by Electronic Arts. So it was fun. I got to kind of see, that whole like having an exit and an outcome. And then once I got to Electronic Arts, it was really hard to work in the corporate world, where you had to like go through this hierarchy to get things done. And I just decided that it wasn't for me. And I took time off. And that's when I actually met mine now. It was then my boyfriend-ish, the guy that I was dating, became my business partner, and now he's my husband. That's how I actually got introduced to the restaurant industry, because he actually had a fast casual teriyaki concept back then.
Oh,
and I know, it's crazy, right? And he's like an Italian white guy too. So
that's so interesting.
I know. It's
how
really
did he start with Asian concept?
I know, right? He was inspired because he just had gone to Portland, Oregon, and then there was this little streetcar, and I think it was like called Dan's Bento, I think is what he said. And he was just loved the fact that it was healthier alternative. It was like, chicken protein over a bed of rice. And so he thought he'd bring it back here to California or to Los Angeles. And so he had this one restaurant, and we were dating, and I said, hey, can I come work for free? I've always loved food. I think for myself, food has always been such a great like connector of people and really great
community,
right? And for our family, everything's centered around food. Any big occasions, small occasions, all these great memories. And he said, of course, come work for free. I would love that.
I was going to say, only a woman would say, come work for free.
I know, right? And yes. I really should have said, I should have set some boundaries after like the first week. But I fell in love with it. And I looked at him, I said, hey, do you want to scale this? Because I can help you with, the business part of it. I could write you a check. What do you think? And he's like, of course, and somehow, again, it was like this young naivete. We were dating. We thought it'd be so much fun to do this together. And here we are 20 plus years later. But so we actually had a fast casual teriyaki concept, realized that was not scalable because back in the early 2000s, no one knew what teriyaki was. So that was it was a good lesson learned. But we ended up selling it. We had a second location, had some mild success, lots of lessons learned. And, there were some highs and a lot of lows too. And we actually had gotten married. I was pregnant, and I'm like, we can't do this. We need to do something that's going to like create a little bit more success.
Yes.
And so we were able to sell it and took that capital to then go build Mendocino Farms.
Wow. And why like the sandwich business? Like, were you looking for something healthier, like another, or, obviously a lot of times when people write a business plan, they're looking at where the gap is in the marketplace. Was that what it was for you, or you guys love sandwiches?
Yeah, there was three things that we saw that was happening back then. So the first one, just like you said, what's the gap? Because we had already been in a category that no one understood. So we're like, okay, number one, be in a category where it's a 3-second or just a 1-word descriptor and everyone will understand it, because we don't want to go through 10 minutes of describing something again. Right. And then the gap that we saw was, in sandwiches, there was nobody else in the category at that point that dominated like Subway, where Subway was fast food, lower price point, but not better ingredients. And, kind of along that same time, people were starting to want, the Whole Foods market was just kind of emerging, and everyone was calling it the whole paycheck because people wanted, they didn't care just about what they were putting into their bodies, but they cared about where their food was coming from. And so I think for us, that was another aha moment of, let's be in this category of better food, better ingredients, higher, more elevated gourmet style of sandwiches that no one else was doing, just focused on sandwiches. Because you had Jones on Third locally, there was Clementine, there was like Dean and DeLuca's with their higher end grocer, but their focus wasn't sandwiches. It was like a bunch of other things. And so we're like, okay, let's focus on sandwiches, chef driven, but at a $10 to $12 price point, which is still more than Subway, but but much less than some of these higher end places, but we'll make it up in volume because we just knew from an operational standpoint how to set up that line.
What was the first outlet? Where was
First
it
one,
located?
it was in downtown LA. It was at the base of a high rise on Grand Avenue, right across now the Disney Concert Hall. It was 900 square feet. It was a failed Starbucks, which,
Yeah.
back then that was unheard of. But there was too many Starbucks, and so they decided to close that. That was actually their kind of training location. It was tiny, and so we just made do with that. It was across from our Teriyaki concept, so we kind of already had a following. We knew the landlord, so there was a lot of pluses. But yeah, it was a crazy place to open.
So yeah, exactly. So when when you basically started this concept, like, how do you know when it's time to expand? So you're basically are like, okay, I have this concept, people are coming, and then why not just stay with one? Because I mean, how many outlets are there now? There's
You know what? There's 50 and we're opening up 51 next year or next week. Sorry, next week. But I think that aha moment of when should we do another one, it came literally within the first couple days. And I know that sounds crazy. The first day we opened.
I love to hear that. It means you have a success story coming.
Well, I mean, it's just really interesting because we knew that sandwiches we were going to do okay because we're in this urban location in downtown where, everyone, there was other sandwich, like there was like a low end deli that was already killing it, even though it was just like mediocre. So we understood that it's quick if we did it healthier. But there was also the off-premise catering component that we knew that could really help us too, because we did a lot of caterings before, which is the whole other thing that kind of helped us with during the pandemic was we already understood off premise. So it was kind of nice that we had that. But anyways, on the first day, I think we had set our pars that we said, okay, we're probably going to sell maybe 150 to 200 sandwiches. Literally within, I think the first hour and a half, we sold out. And Mario and I looked at each other. We're like, okay, so we'll just up our bread count a little bit more, tomorrow. And literally, I think the first week we just kept upping and we just kept running out. And finally we're like, okay, we just have to order a shit ton more. So it was crazy. We're like, people like this. People want better food. And it's pretty affordable. And I think the other differentiator, and that was the third thing, when we say with the aha moment of being able to build something that had a real elevated hospitality component to it, where there's, we talk about culture and building this culture where it's really about taking care of people. For us, it was this idea of selling happy, and for us, we've trained this, our product is not selling our guests a sandwich or salad at this point, it's selling happy. And then our guests eat happy. And so how do you do that? Right. And so that has always been in the core of what we built. And we knew we wanted to scale this, but it actually took us almost 2.5, 3 years before we opened up store 2. Because what we really wanted to do was make sure that being able to do, this mission of selling happy, it sounds so easy. It's like, oh, just go give great customer service. It's actually really, it's a lot harder because you have to be so methodical, in our training and everything that we do. How do you ingrain these values, right, into every daily action, to the smallest little thing? And so,
who deemed that? So when you come up with a concept that's as large as that, we're delivering happy, right? There's subcategories of that, right? Whether that be quality of ingredients, outward customer service, experience in the location, right? I'm sure I'm just saying this because
you're
my marketing brain happening. Yeah. But I think how did you and your husband sit down? Do you and your husband split responsibilities, or?
We split responsibilities, but in the beginning, everything was kind of it was just the two of us. So we just did, I guess. And it was just a lot of conversation. I think it's again, how we grew up both. We have very similar backgrounds, both our parents, their family's from Italy. My parents are from Taiwan, and it's strong family values about taking care of each other, taking care of people. My dad's an entrepreneur. His grandfather was an entrepreneur. And so it was all about how do you take care of your team and not just give them just a paycheck and a job. It's actually really about creating careers and livelihoods for people and hopefully being able to transform their families. And so that was always the core of what we wanted to build together. And then in regards to how do we create this whole like idea, like this mission of selling happy? I mean, we just broke it down to what you just said, right? And I think in the restaurant industry, people call it steps of service, but we call it points of contact because we don't, we don't have servers coming to the tables, but the minute the guest walks in, we talk about each station, and we even do it very differently. You don't go straight to the register. We actually have a host. So this whole idea of now this is one more touch point that you have with your guests that's very different, and I could spend one-on-one time with you. And we have, we'll train everyone on the technical skills, but beyond that, the expectations are there's going to be these wows, these moments of humanity that we call, how you could sell happy. And we train that. And that is so important. So it's, and that way it's consistent, and each person, even though it's in their own voice, their own tone, their own personality, there's just certain things that they're going to have to do beyond just, taking your order, serving you your food. And so every single touch point, we have those things put into place and they're trained. When we onboard people, we invest so much time into just talking about who we are, why we exist. Unlike other restaurants, one of my biggest pet peeves. And so this is all like conversations Mario and I have, like, what do we love about certain places? What do we really wish if, we could, what would we do differently? And so, one of them is, it's just, and so it was just like a collaboration, and my husband is amazing. He's like a leadership whiz too. And so it just took a lot of time, but, it was just something that was so important to us because we didn't want to scale just to scale to make money.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to it.
You feel like that's one of your key differentiators in the premium space?
I do.
General.
I do, because, anyone, and I think this is for, again, any company who, anything that you want to build, I believe that we're all just reinventing certain things because everything is kind of out there. And don't get me wrong, there's still new category, but
they say no idea is an original idea. It's what
right. They're all inspirations, right? They're inspirations. And especially in the restaurant category. I mean,
and by the way, thank God.
Right. Yeah. Or else, I mean, so
thank God we have a point to start at.
Absolutely. So we're always inspired by others, but you have to have something different. I mean, especially in the food industry, table stakes is you have to have great food. If you don't have great food, why do people want to go back? But for us, it was this idea of, it was the experience, and it was how you made people feel. And that's why we don't even call it customer service. It's hospitality, right? Hospitality is how you make people feel. And again, that builds that loyalty and that relationship. So everything we do, and I hate to say it, I could go on. It's about building relationships. It's about connecting with your guests. It's about connecting with your team. And more importantly, even with our vendors and partners, so those are our three key stakeholders. Because if you treat people right, again, it's like family.
Yes.
Like you treat your family with the best and with so much love. And why wouldn't you do that too? And we don't call them customers, to your guests, because guests are people who you welcome into your home. Customers are, it's a transaction.
Actually is a much more warm way of looking at people that you serve, right? Like really seems like you and your husband, Mario, and the vast majority of probably all the managers that you have really come from a place of like service. Like you
absolutely.
Yeah, like one of the things that we talked about before we got on the call was really, we were talking about integrity and having integrity in what you do and bringing that love to like the most mundane tasks that we have to do. But still knowing that it's serving a greater purpose. Right.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things, and one of our values, and you just said it, is do the ordinary extraordinary. Because again, I hate to say the food industry, it's pretty, there are a lot of mundane tasks that you can do, but if you know that there's this higher purpose of taking care of people, and you can, we tell, and I think a lot of our team members who come on board at first, they don't get it. I'm like, you transform people's lives when they walk into that restaurant. We started in downtown LA. And, there's a lot of, we were both in the corporate world. You remember how stressed you were? And like, you just would have a shitty day and you're like, okay, now let's go eat. Maybe this will make us feel better, but you're still carrying that
rare occasion that you got to go to lunch.
Exactly. Right. Or someone would bring it back to you basically. But, totally. People would come in and, our team member would be like, they're so mean. They're so grumpy. Like, and I said, listen, if you put on a smile and you actually take care of them, guess what they're going to do? They're going to eventually go, oh my gosh, this is the place that they're going to come. This is the one place that someone cares about who I am and what I need.
Yes.
Right. And that is one of the things that that's why people came and would wait in these long lines. They're like, we just love so-and-so. They're so sweet. They're so kind. It's the one place where I could come and I just get a break from all the craziness. Right. And so, we'll have crazy stories too about, amazing stories, and I shouldn't call them crazy. Like there's this one mom, and it was in our Costa Mesa store, and we were right next to the hospital, and she would come. I mean, it was for a period of time, and our team member had started having conversation with her because they noticed that she would come all the time between like 2 and 4, which was our off time.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you mind me asking why you're here? And they're like, this is my one moment of solace where I can just get away. My daughter's in the ICU, and you guys just are so kind to me.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
I just love coming here. It's like my like kind of sanctuary. And so, when you hear stories, that's like, one of the extremes. And there's just some really great, like, happy stories. But, this is where it's the higher purpose of really being able to change someone's day, even in that small moment, because we're living in a world of like chaos and just like, just frenetic pace. And if you come in, or, even right now it's a digital world, and we're still trying to figure out how to build that relationship digitally and still take care of you and still make you feel loved, even with that connection. And I think connection is just important today.
Yeah, well, that I feel that connection's core to the human existence, and I think you're right. It was interesting. I was thinking about digital contact this morning related to a different industry, and I was thinking, I wonder if they find it difficult to discern where they invest their time, because so much is done online, and there's not the like, oh, I remember her, kind of like what you're saying, the touch points that along the way make you feel like you're an individual, not a number, right?
I think we still definitely try to create that guest experience, even if it's digital. Like, let's say you order online and you come in and you pick it up. One of the things we train is like, start making sure that if this name keeps popping up, like, remember that if they walk in and they come get it, say, hey, Michelle, like, thanks for coming in, or write a nice little note, or whatever it is, right? If they call in, I mean, it's crazy. People still use the phone a lot. Like, oh my gosh, Michelle, it's so
I love
nice
that somebody's using the phone.
Yeah, I know, right?
I say that all the time. I'm like, pick up the phone, call.
I don't get it. Like, there's places now where you can't call to talk to a human. It's, and I guess, again, if you're in this hospitality industry, it's about human connection. We have this amazing VP of training, Jim Rich, and he calls it moments of humanity. And he goes, we need moments of humanity, especially in this day and age. We didn't realize how much we needed it back then, but now it's like human connection
more
is
than
so
ever.
important.
We need it. Yes,
absolutely.
So tell me, how did you do all of this? Oh, you're a mother of 2 kids, right? So how did you do it and keep the balance, or try to keep the balance? Just curious. Your inspiration.
I wish I could say I kept the balance. I think it's not dropping the ball. That's all. It's like the juggle, and hopefully one ball doesn't drop, but everything's still up in the air. I don't, if you ask my kids, I think that they can tell you how well I did. I can't judge myself. I tried the best I could. I think the one thing I really tried to focus on was making sure that I prioritize what was important. So would carve out time, and I would tell my team as well. And I think it's part of it as being a leader. You want others to feel comfortable to have that balance once they have kids, or if they have to take care of their parents. And so I think, again, being very transparent and communicative, I told them, now that my kids are older, if they have certain holidays that take off, I'm going to take off. And it's always, you can still bother me. It's not like, I'm not working, but I want to be there for them. If they have events, I'm going to carve out my time and make sure that I go there first. And so it was, like, I just made it my priority. Guilt is always there, but I also try to be very present. So if I decided to go to the event, I'm going to be present. And if I'm at work, I'm going to be present. But it's just staying really organized. I mean, that's the sad part, is I think my life was run on a calendar, all the time. I mean, every hour was accounted for, every 30 minutes was accounted for. And I would be looking like if the school sent out a calendar of all the different events, guess what was put into my calendar? every single one of those dates. So they'd be carved out.
Exactly.
But
Well,
it's hard.
it sounds like you were trying to give yourself grace in a time where it would be difficult to be graceful.
Trying to, but we're always beating ourselves up, right? Always beating ourselves up. I mean, I think, we talked about stress earlier, and there's just an incredible amount of stress, and you don't realize how tense you are and how many things can happen to you during that time. We just all brush it off and we're like, oh, they'll be tomorrow. And I think what I've come to now with where I'm at is life is so short. And I was telling my husband this the other day because he was doing something. I go, we're all going to wake up tomorrow and there's going to be this beautiful day still. That work is still going to be there. Like, let's just, again, it's priorities. Like, of course, if the building is falling down, we have to go fix it. But if it's just a really big issue it's not going to be fixable like today, it's going to be okay.
Do you think that you could recognize stress a little bit more easily now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I see it. The other day I was really stressed because, I was hosting that event at my house and I was panicking about something. And I started taking it out on my kids. They were asking me something and I started getting like a little bit more frenetic and a little bit louder. And they're like, ooh, there's that old mom. And I didn't recognize that back then. That must have I only had probably one speed and one tone. And I caught myself and I was like, oops, I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit stressed, and I think I've also learned how to meditate. So I'm taking those moments now for myself, like 10 minutes every morning, just to like have a little bit more space and calm for myself.
Yeah.
But
I think the good thing that you're mentioning is that you're recognizing it. And I think something that you just said is really, it's like a lot of times, like our parents' generation would never apologize for the behavior. So
I think
recognize and apologize is a big deal.
Yeah. And I don't think I did it either before, when I was running crazy, at a crazy speed. But I realized, and this is, I think part of it is being a leader, is when you make a mistake, you apologize. And I'm thinking, now I've thought to myself, why haven't I done that to my kids? Like, we all make mistakes. We're human. And I'll tell them I'm human, so I apologize. And it goes a long way with them.
So tell me about like and I do think it goes a long way with art. I mean, it's like they feel like they won the lottery when we actually acknowledge our shortcomings.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about because you basically, you're not working day to day on Mendocino Farms now. But you still are super involved with minority-owned women's businesses. In addition, like you act as an advisor. So talk to me a little bit about that part of your business.
So it was interesting. It kind of was born out of the pandemic too, because I transitioned out of the day-to-day of Mendo in 2020. So I thought I was going to go on and create another concept. And then all of a sudden the world shut down. And the only way I could connect and feel like I was being additive or doing something was I started helping other founders who were scaling or going through this tough time, and they would reach out. And so it was really advice in the beginning. And then I realized, wait a second, not only can I advise these founders, I can also invest in them because they're actually starting, a lot of them are raising capital at the same time. So it was really interesting how that all came about. And then what I found myself gravitating toward, and I mean, there's great business people, and it doesn't matter if you're male, female, but, a lot of women were starting to reach out to me as well, because I think it's hard. There's not as many mentors. There's not as many advisors that are female and may have gone through kind of the life cycle of what I've gone through as, from a business perspective. And so it was just this natural relationship that started, kind of forming. And what I realized too, being a female founder in the restaurant industry, there wasn't a lot of us. And there's starting to be more, but there's still not a lot of us in this, like in the, I guess, with more scale and more multi-units, right? And so raising money was challenging, and I was lucky. I was able to raise because I think my partner was my husband, who's a white male, so that made it easier. And so as I'm looking back, I'm like, you know what, like I need to actually pay it forward, and I want to pay it forward, and I want to be able to support women, and obviously being Asian, minority owned business is also something really important to me. And so that's, I was gravitating toward it without even realizing it. And then when I really sat down and looked at, the spreadsheet that I created of all my different portfolios, I was like, wait a second, like, and so I think, it's just something that I'm very passionate about. Yeah, it's just something I'm very passionate about. And I just feel like we need more representation. You've heard the statistics about females and minority with VC, like in funding. I mean, the percentage is tiny, 2%.
Yeah.
For women-owned businesses. And I think for minority-owned businesses, it's like 1.5, 1.6. So we got to level the playing field.
So, how does one know when they need an investor?
Well,
we were
I think
talking before we got on the call, and I was saying to you, well, service-based industry, it's not something you necessarily go out and ask people for funding for, how do you know?
I mean, I don't know. So I think, hopefully when you're doing your financials and you realize, okay, if I want to, and I think scale, right? I think scale is important. If you want to take something to scale, you're going to need inventory, whether in the restaurant industry, it's to scale for another unit. For CPG, it's usually for inventory and now marketing, and so I think that's the point where you're starting to see the inflection point of like, okay, if I want to get from here to here now, and I want to do it quickly and not just over time through cash flow, I'm going to need to raise. I think the interesting part is there's money out there beyond just getting investors. I think people need, I think it's important in the beginning is maybe not give away equity because you don't really know what your value is in the beginning, right? I think especially for women and minority owned businesses, there's a lot of interesting loans that are out there. There's a lot of different grants that are out there. I know it takes more time because you have to fill out applications and all these different things, but I really do believe that process is really interesting because it really makes you start thinking about your business and where you want to go. They're asking you questions
about your business. Yeah,
absolutely. And
a lot of times some entrepreneurs aren't necessarily always clear about where they want to go. They're more flowing,
Absolutely. And it's kind of like they have this idea and they have this dream and they're selling the dream, where when you're applying for a grant and a loan, you're not selling the dream. You're selling it on facts, right? Mm-hmm. And there is a dream. Don't get me wrong. You have this outcome that you want, but you have to be more methodical about it. So that's what that's the advice that I give a lot of new founders, or go to friends and family first.
Yeah. So, the thing is that even in, so another thing that I find a lot, and I'm sure because you're advising people, some people don't understand about scaling. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different, again, it depends on what industry you're in because scale could look different and the needs are different. But and I go back to this again, and this is going to sound crazy. Before you scale and before you even think about like if it's opening up another unit or if it's it's really important to figure out what's your why and your purpose and really understand like who's your core customer, right? Why do you deserve to exist?
Because my language, Ellen, I like it.
Right. Because again, I go back to this. If you don't define that from day one, it's hard to recreate. And it's also as you go through, all these different stages and all these different challenges and questions you're going to ask yourself, you have to have the values to go back as your filter for helping you making decisions. Like, why am I going to spend this money? Why am I going to hire this person? Why am I going to hire this consultant or whatever? Does it go back and match exactly what your values and your purpose are? Because I think that's where a lot of people just start kind of like throwing money at things, or like, okay, I think I'm going to try this, or okay, I'm going to go in this direction. But if you go back to your North Star again, it's like, this is a reason why we're doing this. Let's stand by this. And it's a lot easier to rally people behind you when you can say, this is our why.
This is my mission. This is
it. Right. And again, I go back to the pandemic. Like you want people to like be in this like fight with you. Like you guys have to believe in the same thing and run in the same direction. And I know it sounds really kumbaya, but you need to define this, and even when you're raising money, that was a lot of like, what's your culture like? What are your values? I mean, they ask you this, and you need
that they're asking that question. I don't think they used to ask that question quite as much.
I know, but they ask it now, and everyone wants a mission-driven company.
Everything is so mission-driven now. It's like the big hot topic.
It is, and it shouldn't be, and it has to be authentic and genuine. And I think that's the cool part is when I really meet founders who really have like, this is my why, this is why I created this, and they can talk about it. You know, it's it's the soul of the company, and you can't replicate that. I think you had asked me earlier, a lot of people will come in and like eat through our sandwiches and try to replicate it. We go into restaurants and be like, oh, that's our pork belly, or that's, the thing is, it could taste really good, but what they can't replicate is our team and the soul of who they are.
The heart of what it is,
The
heart of
heart.
what your concept is, and who you are.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you around, let's look at it from the standpoint of community, because I know community is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So when a woman is starting their business for the first time, you know, did you have this for yourself, like a personal board? I always recommend to people that I work with, like, establish a personal board. You may not be able to have a board yet, a true board, but who are the people that are surrounding you that are going to help challenge you, question your concept on what your why is, etc. How do you speak to that for women?
I think it's so important to have that. Did I have it? Unfortunately, I did not, all the way, you know, back in the early 2000s. I guess my personal board was my husband. You know, he was, I guess, my sounding board.
Yeah.
But it was really hard for myself because, and I don't know if people take this into account, but when your husband is your business partner as well, and it's a male dominated industry, men obviously gravitate toward men, but then it's also awkward to have one-on-one time or go have drinks or have dinner, and you don't go play golf. You know, it's just a different relationship when you're the wife and then you have a husband. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a lot of that. I had one really amazing female mentor, but it was more around financials and P&Ls, and she would check in on me once in a while, but I really didn't have it, and I wish I did. I think I would have been a better leader, a better mom, and a better person, and probably a happier person. I carried so much stress, and I always felt like I had to have the answers to everything when I didn't. And there was a lot of imposter syndrome because of that, right? Because I had to pretend like I was this person that I wasn't, when inside I was like crying and like crumbling inside, but I had to have like this facade of like, I know it, I'm good,
I know what I'm doing,
I got it all together, right? And I didn't. So it was hard. Towards the end, I did more, and that, again, this is why I love working with female founders, and I love championing just the female founder kind of like ecosystem, because it's so needed and it's so necessary, and I just didn't have it. So I just, again, want to give back.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're speaking about those kinds of things, it's interesting to know that you didn't have that, and how important that you do think it is now that you're on this other side of it. Because I think that is one of the hardest things, is understanding who to ask and where to get those resources and all of that. And so the other question that I have for you around that is that, you know, when you talk about like getting grants and getting support as a minority owned business, because I'm a minority as well, like, where does one look for that information?
Well, right now, Google is our best friend. No, I'm just kidding. So a lot of research, but again, I think there's a lot of organizations now that can provide you with more information. You know, there's a lot of accelerators. There's a lot of venture funds too that have these accelerator programs. You know, I could speak to like the hospitality industry. There's this amazing organization called Regarding Her that I've been helping, and they provide grants last year we gave away 10 grants to women-owned restaurateurs, and this year we gave 20, and then we also put together an academy. It's basically like an accelerator program with 10-week sessions. I mean, that's one way, but that's why I think it's so important to network and build your network. And it's not about networking, you know, just
when I think of networking the same. It's not like schmoozy and go talk to the president of, it's more about community building.
It's about community building. You're absolutely right. It's about going to people that you feel like are like-minded and want to support. And there's so many organizations now out there that can do this. So I think that's one. And, you know, in terms of like the loans, your bank is a great place to go. I'm going to do a huge plug for City National Bank, because I think they're amazing with supporting entrepreneurs, women. They do so much great work in that capacity. So, you know, go to your bank, but City National Bank is an incredible bank. that can help you navigate through that as well.
That's good to know. And as far as, I always ask every person who comes on the podcast, I have two very important questions. And this one like the back of your head.
But wait, Michelle, I just have to say, you're the first podcast that I've just done with no prepared questions or any of this. I'm scared now for these two questions.
No. These are easy. You'll know this like the back of you'll know these like the back of your hand. But like with me with podcasts, I feel so much of it. And I give people questions and all that kind of stuff, like how do you make opportunities? But those are so like stereotypical. I feel like so much of it is really like what shows up in the moment and really the essence of the person. Yeah. And so like for you don't really need to prepare anything because
you're very kind. And I like this more because it's more of a conversation and dialogue. So thank you.
Like I feel like, the heavy-handed is not always that helpful. So I'm speaking from my own perspective.
I love it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. So the first question is, what are your top 5 core values? So I know you know these.
5. Well, that's a lot of core values, but for me, it's, I think, maybe they're not as easy. No, I just wrote a couple out for my son. He just turned 18. First, I think always be a student, always wanting to learn. That I think is really important for myself. There's another one, we call it getting better every day. It's called GBED. I don't want to, and I ask this of my kids, like, I don't want to just get up and do the same thing over and over again. I want to actually get better at it. And it could be the simplest thing. Respect, obviously, is one, to having integrity and respect for each other. Family is super important to me. That's my like number one priority. And I think at the end of the day, it's how do we create joy? So I guess
that's funny that you say that, because so I also heard community, connection, a lot of what your values are for what you've established Mendo on is a lot of the essence of like who you are. Which is just so beautiful, such a beautiful part of you, and what you want to bring to the world.
Well, and I'm going to add 6 is giving back. And you just said that because it's so important. I think this world, like, if we're so fortunate, and if we can give back and just make it a better place, I think that's so important too.
So, why do I not do interviews on Mondays is because the gardener comes and he makes it very loud while I do this.
That's
like,
hilarious.
oh my God, can that blower please get out of here?
I can hear it. So that's the good part.
Good. That makes me feel better that you can't hear it. What I was going to say is that I think that one thing that you mentioned also is how do you bring happy to the customer? So the other part of my question, when I said, well, I have 2 other questions for you. One was about your core values, but you said one of them was joy, right? So how do you bring fun every day into your life?
That's a good question, Michelle.
Because they say that fun is the gatekeeper to being like for curiosity, but to remain playful keeps you young.
So I think and this is crazy to say how I make myself, I push myself to do something that might not be the most comfortable for me at all times, because I feel like, again, that goes back to learning, right? And it's fun. In the end, you always feel so good about putting yourself out there. So like today, I really was excited to talk to you, Michelle, but I'm like, oh man, I have to get on a podcast and talk about myself. Like, why am I doing this? Like this, and I was like very nervous, but look, I'm so excited. Like this has been so much fun. And this is probably the highlight of my day. So, it's
well, I appreciate that.
And so I think it's things like that. And honestly, like I just, for me, it's about hanging out with my kids right now. I've never had this opportunity. And my son is about to go to college. And so part of having fun is really when they come home, and I get to see them now when they come home, is sitting down and having great conversations with them.
I love that. Well, I think that the thing is that it's funny how life works, that like you could really see like the full circle of life when your child starts to look to that next step to leave for college, right? And I think the thing is that people always say when our kids are young, like, oh, it's going to go by so fast. And we're like, ugh, are you kidding me? The toddlerhood is like awful.
Like, I want this to pass. That's what I
Exactly.
think.
I'm like, can't they get to be grown-ups already? Not really. But I think the thing is that you're describing that the time is fleeting, and to share them with the people that you love is important.
It's so important, like just spending it with really great people. And I think for myself, and not that there's not great people, but people who enrich me are the ones I want to continue to like be with and connect and spend time with. And some that are a little bit more depleting, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to start shedding some of that. And it's been incredible. I know that sounds like a really mean thing to do, but
No, you're setting a
so
boundary for your health.
but it's been really great for me for the last couple of years. And yeah, fun is connecting with people. So I really do try to connect with people, at least new people, a couple times a week. And if I can, once a day would be amazing. So thank you. I mean, this has been great.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful. And I just would love for you to leave people with any information that you'd love for them to have, whether it be, I'm sure they're not going to go to your personal website, but like if you have a website or Instagram or ways that
Well,
they can connect with you.
my Instagram is very boring. It's all about my kids and our adventures at this point. But it's my Instagram is just ellen.c.chen. And then the one thing that I'm really that I've been working a lot with is it's an organization called Teach AAPI.
Mhm.
And we're about to have a fundraiser. And if people could learn, it's just teachaapi.org to go learn more about the organization itself. It would mean a lot to me.
Oh, that would be amazing. Can you tell me what the acronym stands for?
So it's Asian American Pacific Islander is AAPI, but the organization is basically, through the pandemic, a group of us came together and we just felt like it was so important for our history, our culture, our kind of the whole, to be integrated into the school system. And so we've been partnering with a lot of great schools. We've been helping to create curriculum to be able to kind of have schools do more plug and play, because I know a lot of policy has passed where they're saying you have to teach it, but these teachers are under a lot of stress, and there's not financially, there's also where's the money for the curriculum to be created. And so that's kind of that is our mission right now. So we're raising money to create more curriculum, to do more partnerships with other organizations to come in and basically give this as a toolkit for school systems to use.
I think that's great because it's interesting. As each different cultural representation has come in to their own strife, right,
Yeah.
during these times, specifically around educating them around Asian culture is important. And funny enough, I never stopped to think about that. I mean, I have so many Asian friends, as you know.
And it's interesting because I mean, just me being Asian, I'm like, we don't learn a lot about and then if you think about just the word Asia and how many countries fall under
so
Asia, it's insane. But just with everything that's going on, just for people to understand, like, they're like, oh, Asians are so lucky because they're all so rich and they're all so smart. And I'm like, they're.
Do you have any idea?
Exactly. So this is part.
Yeah.
And so this is part of it, is just like understanding our history and culture here, in this country. I mean, it goes way back when, and there's been a lot that has happened to bring us to this point. And, this idea of model minority, all these different things, it's just educating people, and hopefully creating a lot of allyship too, as well.
I mean, I think one of the greatest things you could do is commit and give back, like when we talk about service to your own culture. It's the same way that I feel, growing up half Mexican and half German. I feel like for me, like I always want to give back to Hispanic people, because I feel like we need to help each other move forward, right?
Absolutely.
And send generations. So
absolutely.
Well, that was great. Thanks for sharing that part of it. And thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I can't wait for this episode to come out. And I'm so grateful that you just never know what's going to show up. It's kind of similar to what you're saying. It's like, you're like, oh, to get on a call and talk about myself today. And there's just so many beautiful gifts that come forward by connecting with amazing people like you.
Well, thank you. I mean, the feeling is absolutely mutual. I'm so glad we finally got to meet, even though we were like in the same room together just a couple days ago.
I know. I'm like, wait, that was Ellen's house? That's so crazy.
Anyways,
Anyways,
thank you for having me.
of course, anytime. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.